Coming up, we've got a really interesting show today. Sometimes the most powerful voices in music stay silent for years, even decades, never getting their due until after they've left the planet. You could call them post-mortem hitmakers. Today we're covering 5 artists who poured their hearts into their craft only to face rejection and obscurity while they were alive. But then their music went viral after their deaths. We've got a singer who was dubbed the one-man Beach Boys when he put out several records in the 70s, but his songs went nowhere. He actually passed away in 2015 from Parkinson's with 0 hits to his name. But now a decade later, his obscure 1979 song has taken over the charts because of its popularity on TikTok. You gotta hear the story coming up. Plus, there's a California frontman who passed just before his band's self-titled masterpiece conquered the airwaves. There's also the tragic tale of a vocal virtuoso with an otherworldly range who in a freak accident drowned in a treacherous river after a tugboat sailed past him. His 1994 cover song later went to #1, 14 years after its original release and 11 years after his death. Add to that a folk poet who lived in silence and died believing that he was a complete failure, only to be rediscovered when a car commercial featured one of his songs. It happened decades later. Man, you gotta see this one. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember begging your parents for a G.I. Joe or a Star Wars figure or a Barbie when you were at the toy store as a kid, you're gonna dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe if you are subscribed, unsubscribe, and resubscribe so I come in your feed. And like, share, and comment to help this channel keep going. All right, it's time for one of the most interesting countdowns that we've ever covered on this channel. Artists who finally made it after they were already gone. This one was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. We're going to dive right into it. Coming in at #5, I've got the story of Sublime singer, songwriter, guitarist Bradley James Nowell, an architect of the Long Beach sound. Now, Bradley and Sublime, they were like nothing else you were hearing on the radio at the time. You remember. I mean, Bradley created a musical dialect that captured the sun-drenched, grit-covered reality of coastal California in the 90s. He was a musical polyglot, a man who could translate punk and rock and ska and reggae and hip-hop in a single seamless vibration that spoke directly to a generation of disenfranchised youth. Now, the foundation of Sublime, that was built on a brotherhood that goes back to the beginning. You had Bradley on guitar and vocals, but the engine room was made up of bassist Eric Wilson and drummer Bud Gaw. I mean, the trio grew up together. In fact, Eric and Bud lived across an alley from each other in Long Beach. Some stories say that their bond was instigated by a head-on collision on their big wheels, when they were little kids. I mean, whether that's true or not, they grew up together and they became garage band wannabes. They spent years honing their unpolished, completely authentic sound. And in the early days, the industry didn't know what to do with them at all. They were like, what do we do with these guys? They were too punk for the reggae crowds and too reggae for the punk crowds. But Bradley and the boys, they didn't give a crap. I mean, these guys embrace a fierce DIY ethos, and they actually started their own label, Skunk Records, since nobody would give them a shot. They did it all. They sold CDs out of the back of their cars, they played backyard parties and dive bars, and they slowly built a loyal and rowdy cult following. So they released their debut album, 40 Ounces to Freedom, on June 1st, 1992, and it was eventually championed by K-Rock in LA, specifically the track Date Rape, which became a surprise alternative radio staple years after it was recorded.
For date rape, I never get laid.
But it wasn't just about the party. I mean, Bradley's songwriting had emotional depth. Tracks like What I Got, Santeria, and Wrong Way, they showcased a versatility that allowed him to move from aggressive, distorted riffs to tender melodic ballads. I mean, he had this incredible soulful voice that could sound like a classic reggae crooner 1 minute and a shredded punk frontman the next. And then there was the 1994 album Robin the Hood, which was recorded in a crack house using pirated electricity. It was definitely experimental, chaotic, and brilliant. A snapshot of a band living on the edge of everything. And we can't talk about Sublime without mentioning the fourth member of the band, Lou Dog. Bradley's Dalmatian, of course, was a constant presence on stage and in the studio. During the first Warped Tour, the band became notorious for their unruly behavior, fueled by what Bradley called a daily wake-and-bake culture and constant drinking. Now, Lou Dog was often the only one who could keep up with all the chaos, roaming the stage while the band churned out high-energy sets. By early 1996, the band had finally signed with a major. It was MCA, and they just finished recording their self-titled masterpiece. Bradley was at a turning point. He just married his girlfriend Troy, and he was a new father to his son Jacob. He seemed to be on the verge of finally getting his life together and reaping the rewards of all his hard work. But on May 25th, 1996, just weeks before the new album was set to drop, the shadows finally caught up with him. During a tour stop in San Francisco, Bradley was found unresponsive in his hotel room. He died of a heroin overdose at just 28 years of age. Bradley vanished just as the world was finally ready to listen, to hear the songs. The label was left with a finished record and a frontman who was no longer there to sing the songs. Now, said drummer Bud Gott, just like Nirvana, Sublime died when Brad died. So the surviving members decided to release the album as the last gift to the fans, and the response was unlike anything anyone expected. Sublime became a cultural phenomenon. Songs like What I Got and Santeria dominated the airwaves for years, turning a scrappy DIY band from Long Beach into one of the biggest acts of the era. What I Got went to #1 on the US alternative charts. Santeria and Wrong Way both came in at #3, and Doing Time reached number 28. The album itself went to number 13 on the Billboard 200 and has since sold 5 million, 5 times platinum in the US.
Is what I got. I said, remember that. Practice Santeria. I ain't got no crystal ball. And I'm sorry when I said that until this very day it was the wrong way. Summertime, the living's easy.
All right, coming in at the #4 position, it's a man that most people have never heard of, but I think you probably will from here on out. A guy named Chris Rainbow. So if that name doesn't ring a bell, I mean, no worries, you're not the only one. Chris Rainbow was a man who preferred the shadows of the recording studio to the glare of the spotlight, but his voice carried the load for some of the most sophisticated pop and progressive rock ever put to tape. Now, born Christopher Harley in Glasgow, Scotland in '46, he eventually adopted the pseudonym Chris Rainbow. Chris Rainbow turned out to be the perfect name for him because his music was a spectrum. A vibrant, multi-layered explosion of color and harmony that felt like it was really from another dimension. Chris Rainbow was often referred to by those in the know as a one-man Beach Boys. And when you listen to his work, you understand why. Long before digital recording made layering vocals easy, Chris was a virtuoso of analog tape. He'd spend hours in the studio, meticulously multi-tracking his own voice over and over again, till he had created a lush symphonic tapestry. It was a cathedral of sound. Rainbow possessed an uncanny ability to harmonize with himself. He's kind of had that Pet Sounds perfection that Brian Wilson called a teenage symphony to God. He had that. Chris's solo career, that began with a string of albums that are now considered cult classics by audiophiles. 1975's Home of the Brave and 1979's White Trails are melodic pop masterstrokes for sure. I mean, tracks like Gimme What I Cried For and Living in the World Today showcase a man who understood great melody. Songs that stay with you for the long haul, for decades. But despite the critical acclaim, mainstream success remained elusive for him. Where Chris Rainbow really made his mark, though, was as the secret weapon for some of the biggest names in prog rock. If you're a fan of the Alan Parsons Project, then chances are you've been listening to Chris Rainbow for years without even knowing it. Alan Parsons, the man who engineered The Dark Side of the Moon, he knew sonic genius when he heard it. He brought Chris into the fold, and Chris became a staple of the project's most iconic era. I mean, think about the track Snake Eyes, from the 1980 masterpiece, The Turn of a Friendly Card. That complex, interlocking vocal arrangement is Chris Rainbow. All of it. He brought technical precision and emotional atmosphere to those records. elevating them into cinematic experiences. He also graced tracks like Winding Me Up and Gemini on the Eye in the Sky album. He was the invisible thread that stitched APP's concept albums together, really.
You've been winding me up too long. Who'll say why you and I are Gemini?
Tragically, Chris Rainbow passed away in 2015 after a battle with Parkinson's disease. He was only 68. His death sparked a massive wave of tributes from the giants of the industry. Men like Alan Parsons and Brian May, who recognized that one of the great voices of their generation was gone. In fact, Alan would say, "It was with great sadness that I read today of the passing of Chris Rainbow. He was an amazing talent and an integral part of the project sound. Eric and I used to call him the one-man Beach Boys. I will always remember his funny stories, his mimicking ability, and his hilarious catchphrases. Sessions with him were always filled with laughter. I will miss him greatly." So what's really cool is that there is a new chapter unfolding in Chris Rainbow's story. In the years since his passing, there's been a profound redemption arc for his solo work. A new generation of music fans, tired of overprocessed vocals and modern pop, have rediscovered the organic, handcrafted brilliance of Chris Rainbow. It's actually a song, Be Like a Woman, that's at the center of it all. Now, it was originally recorded for his 1979 album, White Trails. Be Like a Woman, though, has gained renewed popularity. It started happening in late 2025 after becoming a viral hit on TikTok. In November of 2025, weekly streams of the track rose from 18,000 to 66,000. And by February of 2026, weekly streams exceeded 2.5 million. Now, months after that, Be Like a Woman is up to 63 million streams on Spotify alone. Now, for comparison, Chris's next most popular song, Don't Take the Night Away, it's sitting at 2.4 million streams.
Don't take the night away.
And nothing else in his Spotify catalog has even broke 1 million. The Billboard charts, they used to be the measuring stick, but with social media being the place people listen to and discover music, the new charts are TikTok and YouTube. And Chris Rainbow is at the top of the TikTok charts. Be Like a Woman, it's also making a push on various music charts in 26. It's reached the Billboard Hot 100. It's number 18 on the US Hot Rock and Alternative charts, and number 15 on the UK Independent Singles Breakers chart. Before this, Chris Rainbow never had a charting single in his entire life. Now, 47 years after he recorded the song and over a decade after his death, Be Like a Woman has been resurrected by TikTok. Women are filming themselves and they're using that song. It's amazing. All right, coming in the number 3 position on the countdown, we have the ethereal and incomparable Jeff Buckley. Now, Jeff was a man who lived under the shadow of his father, folk legend Tim Buckley.
Waiting to hold you.
Jeff created a light that was entirely his own. He had a vocal range that could pierce the heavens, a multi-octave instrument that moved from a guttural growl to a shimmering falsetto. His voice left audiences paralyzed. Jeff's journey to the top of the mountain, that began in the early 90s when he arrived in New York City. This was a period of New York turbulence, as he would say, as he navigated the gritty, smoke-filled clubs of the Lower East Side. Jeff found a home at a tiny Irish cafe called Jeaimeé. It was there that he began to weave his magic, his vocal magic. These performances were captured on his 1993 EP, Live at Jeaimeé, which featured his unique blend of jazz, rock, and soul. In '94, though, Jeff released his only completed studio album, Grace. It was a record of mourning and exceptional soul-searching, as it would say, and it's now considered one of the greatest debuts in rock history. Now, while the album features powerhouse tracks like Last Goodbye and Mojo Pin, the song that's, of course, become the definitive hidden gem and a global anthem is his cover of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah.
Yeah, this is our last goodbye. Love you so. Hallelujah.
Jeff stripped its original synths and transformed it into a haunting, fragile prayer. He really turned it into a meditation on love and loss that has made, really, Jeff the patron saint for anyone seeking solace in music. But there's a tragic irony to Jeff's story. Despite the immense respect he garnered from legends like Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, he was always searching for something that he couldn't quite find. In 1997, Jeff moved to Memphis, Tennessee to begin work on his second album, My Sweetheart the Drunk. But Jeff was in a state of intense creative flux at this moment. He'd endured a difficult childhood and was constantly wrestling with his own identity as an artist. And My Sweetheart the Drunk, that would remain unfinished while Jeff was still alive. Jeff Buckley was unhappy with the recordings. He actually went to Memphis to start all over. However, the Grim Reaper was close on his heels, and the end came swiftly out of the blue like a cruel joke. On the evening of May 29, 1997, Jeff and a friend were driving to a rehearsal space when they decided to stop at the Wolf River Harbor, Mississippi. In a moment of spontaneous joy, really, Jeff decided to go for a swim. He waded into the water fully clothed, wearing his boots, jeans, and a t-shirt, and he started swimming on his back. Now, as he floated, he was singing the chorus of Led Zeppelin's Whole Lotta Love. And then a tugboat passed by, and its wake created a series of treacherous currents. In an instant, Jeff vanished beneath the surface. His body wasn't found until a week later. The music world was shattered. He was only 30 years old. While his only completed studio album, Grace, initially underperformed in the United States, its reputation began growing exponentially through word of mouth and praise from legends like David Bowie and Jimmy Page, who were both huge fans. This posthumous surge also was fueled by the album's frequent use in moody early 2000s television. Dramas like The O.C. and films like Vanilla Sky.
Hallelujah.
More recently, though, Jeff Buckley's influence reached a new peak in early 26 when his soulful ballad Lover You Should Have Come Over entered the Hot 100 for the first time nearly 30 years after his death.
You should have come over.
Its success has been driven by a massive resurgence on TikTok and the release of the acclaimed documentary It's Never Over Jeff Buckley. Great documentary if you haven't seen it. Check it out.
My main influences: love, anger, depression, and Zeppelin.
But the definitive turning point for his mainstream visibility, of course, was his cover of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. Though it became a critical favorite shortly after his death, it didn't achieve massive commercial dominance until about 2008. This is when contestant Jason Castro performed a Buckley-inspired version on American Idol in one of those early seasons.
Hallelujah.
The performance propelled Buckley's recording to number 1 on the Billboard Hot Digital Songs chart and introduced his ethereal vocals to a whole new generation.
It's a broken hallelujah.
Now, beyond Hallelujah, other songs that became staples of his legacy include The Yearning Last Goodbye, the title track Grace, and the posthumously released Everybody Here Wants You. That was from his unfinished second album.
That is so. My time has come. I know everybody here wants you.
His 2004 lost track Forgetter is also an amazing listen. You got to check that out.
To forget her somehow.
All right, we're at number 2. And with this one, I've got to go with one of my favorites ever, Eva Cassidy. Now, I briefly talked about her before, but I want to go in depth here. Eva was a once-in-a-generation talent who was a hidden jewel from the world while she was alive. During her lifetime, she was almost entirely unknown outside of the local music scene in Washington, D.C. But today, her voice is recognized as one of the most beautiful ever captured on tape for sure.
Like never before.
Eva Cassidy grew up in the DC area, and from the beginning, she was a musical chameleon. She inhabited songs of all styles, jazz standards, gritty blues, soulful R&B, folk and gospel, the whole thing. Now, Eva started her professional journey at 18, playing the local circuit with a band called Easy Street, gigs that took her from corporate parties to smoke-filled bars where she built her chops. Despite her incredible gift, though, Eva was painfully shy, often more comfortable in the background than in the spotlight. The turning point came in 1986 when she met Chris Biondo, a bassist and recording engineer who immediately recognized her genius. Biondo became her champion, helping her find backup work and encouraging her to record her own material. But the industry didn't know what to do with Eva Cassidy. In 1992, she teamed up with the godfather of go-go, Chuck Brown, for a duet album called The Other Side. It was a masterpiece of jazz and blues interpretation, featuring tracks like God Bless the Child, and it caught the attention of major labels. But every label wanted Eva Cassidy to pick a single lane and stick to it. Just a jazz singer or a pop artist, whatever. Eva refused to compromise her artistic vision, though, choosing to remain unsigned rather than to be put in a box. In January of 96, Eva took matters into her own hands and she recorded live at Blues Alley. She was devastated by her performance that night because she was battling a terrible cold. But the recording captured a raw, angelic power that is now legendary.
My darling, love and honesty.
It was during the promotional push for that album in July of 96 that the tragedy began to unfold. Eva noticed a persistent ache in her hips, and a few weeks later the diagnosis came back. It was melanoma. It had already spread through her body, reaching her bones and her lungs. Eva's health speedily began to decline from there. On September 17, 1996, Eva gave her final performance at a benefit concert held in her honor at the Bayou in Washington, D.C.
What a wonderful world.
She was so weak, she had to use a walker just to reach the stage. Surrounded by her family and friends and realizing she was facing the end, she closed with Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World, one of the greatest performances ever caught on tape.
I love you.
Eva stripped it down to its most fragile essence, her angelic voice transforming the familiar standard into a bittersweet farewell to the world that she loved. Eva Cassidy passed away on November 2nd, 1996 at the age of 33. It's crazy to think that Eva's story was just beginning from there. In 1999, a recording of her version of Over the Rainbow found its way to Terry Wogan at a BBC Radio 2 in the UK. He started playing it, and the response was unlike anything he'd ever seen in his career. Listeners were stunned by the beauty of Eva's voice, and a posthumous compilation album, Songbird, was released shortly after that.
And the songbirds keep singing when we walked in fields of gold.
In 2001, 5 years after she had died in obscurity, the album hit #1 in the UK charts. Suddenly, the world knew the name Eva Cassidy. Today, Eva Cassidy has sold over 10 million albums worldwide, mostly all after her death. She didn't have the marketing machine or the corporate backing during her life, but she had the voice of a songbird, as well as the integrity to match. If you haven't yet discovered Eva's catalog, from her haunting Fields of Gold to the final heartbreaking performance of What a Wonderful World, you got to check it out. You will not believe your ears.
For you, up among the fields of barley.
This is how good she was. She took a song that was already flawless in Songbird, written and sung to perfection by one of the greats, Christine McVie from Fleetwood Mac. And somehow she enhanced it and made it better.
And the songbirds are singing, and I love you, I love you, I love you.
I actually just did a reaction to this video. I introduced it to Black Pegasus, and he was blown away. You'll have to check out that video because it was such a pleasure to show it, and I just loved seeing the look on his face. He couldn't believe what he was hearing.
For you.
Yeah, this is actually insane already.
Yeah, right.
That's ridiculous.
I know. It's amazing.
Okay, I have to be honest.
Yeah.
And not like I saw anything, but I'm looking at her face on this cover.
Yeah.
I didn't imagine her singing like this. I don't
Yeah.
know. I thought maybe more of like a country twang
Okay.
after I heard this is so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's delicate. It's okay. I'm going overboard because I only heard 20 seconds.
No,
But
it gets better.
This is nice.
As anybody feels when they hear Eva Cassidy.
I feel that when I'm with you, walking fields of gold.
All right, we've reached the summit. And at number 1, I have an incredible story and an artist that has changed the world years after his death. Talking about Nick Drake. Nick Drake was a man made of shadows and soft light. Born in 1948, he was a tall, strikingly handsome, but painfully introverted soul who possessed a musical gift that was decades ahead of its time. He was a folk singer, a master of intricate guitar work. When you listen to a Nick Drake record, I mean, you're hearing atmosphere. This is incredible. Between 1969 and 1972, Nick released 3 albums through Island Records: 5 Leaves Left, Brighter Later, and Pink Moon. These 3 records, they're like a holy trinity of British folk rock. On the first 2, producer Joe Boyd, he surrounded Nick's fragile voice with lush Baroque arrangements, strings that swelled like the tide and woodwinds that danced around his acoustic melodies. Tracks like Riverman and The Breathtaking Northern Sky, some of the most beautiful pieces of recorded music in existence, I'm telling you.
Gonna see the riverman brighten my northern sky.
However, back then, the world, they just wouldn't listen. They weren't listening. Nick Drake suffered from debilitating stage fright and kind of a social awkwardness. It made it nearly impossible for him to promote his work. He'd occasionally perform live, but he would spend the entire set hunched over his guitar, just barely looking at the audience at all, retuning his strings between every single song in total silence. It was a bit uncomfortable for the crowd. It was agonizing for him. As a result, his albums were commercial ghosts. 5 Leaves Left sold only a few thousand copies. I mean, to the suits at their record label, he was a complete failure. To Nick, the lack of recognition was a millstone tied around his neck, dragging him down deep into a dark clinical depression. By the time Nick recorded his final album with producer John Wood, 1972's Pink Moon, he'd stripped everything away. No more strings or session musicians. It was just Nick and his guitar, recorded in 2 midnight sessions. The entire album is only 28 minutes and 22 seconds long. It's stark, it's lonely, it's perfect. But again, it vanished upon release. In early 1974, after a long period of silence and seclusion at his parents' home, Nick reached out to producer Joe Boyd, expressing a desire to record again. He returned to Sound Technique's studio in London for 2 sessions, one in February and one in July. Only 5 songs were successfully recorded. Joe remembers being caught off guard by Nick's bitterness and his anger. According to Boyd, he said that I'd told him he was a genius, and others had concurred. So why wasn't he famous and rich? I mean, think about it. This rage must have festered beneath that inexpressive exterior for years. In the meantime, though, Nick Drake's mental health continued to decline. On November 25th, 1974, at just the age of 26, Nick Drake passed away from an overdose of his prescribed antidepressant. He left this world believing that he was a failure. But music this pure has a way of finding an audience over time. In the 80s and 90s, icons like Robert Smith of The Cure, Peter Buck of R.E.M., and even Kate Bush began citing Nick as a musical influence. However, the true lightning strike moment, the one that changed everything, that occurred in 1999, 25 years after Nick was gone. Volkswagen aired a television commercial called Milky Way to promote their Cabrio convertible. The ad featured a group of young friends driving down a dark country road under a spectacular night sky. The only sound, that was the title track from Nick's final album, Pink Moon. That one 60-second spot did more for Nick's career than any 70s marketing campaign ever could. He sold more records from that than he did in his entire career. Within days, record stores were flooded with requests for the song. People wanted to know who that voice was. And from there, the legend of Nick Drake just grew. Until today, when he is recognized as a pillar of the singer-songwriter genre. His music has been featured in countless films and TV shows. I mean, Practical Magic, Serendipity, The Royal Tenenbaums, Garden State, Fever Pitch.
Bright in my northern sky.
And that only gets us up to 2005. Nick Drake's albums continue to sell more copies every single year. Of course, more than they ever did when he was alive. Currently, Pink Moon sits at 230 million streams on Spotify, and Northern Sky, that's just short of 100 million.
Straight in my new mind's eye.
Nick's, though, is a bittersweet legacy. We have the music, but we lost the man. Before he could see the impact that he would have on the world. I'm telling you, if you haven't yet experienced the quiet magic of Nick Drake, do yourself a favor, turn off the lights and put on Pink Moon or even Northern Sky and just listen. I promise your life will never be the same.
Pink moon, bright in my northern sky.
Oh, that was a sad countdown. 5 who died not tasting the fruits of their labor, but now have reached their full potential posthumously. Let's celebrate them by listening to their music. I'm going to link to it below. Leave us a comment about these great artists. Man, what are your memories of these songs? Have you heard about all these artists? This is one that I hope gets out to a lot of people. I'd love it if you would like and share and comment, because we got to share this music with the masses. With so much, I'm sorry, but crap on the radio today. We've got these 5 voices that never got the attention they deserved when they were alive. We gotta celebrate them. We gotta share it. Leave us a comment. Let's have a great discussion below. If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our community to keep the music alive. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.